So I try to make it a little bit more fun. I'm not like the other kids, as you've probably just heard from the intro. So here's a little introduction into a little bit more about my style.
When you think of superheroes, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Men in tights? Women with superhuman strength? Capes? Lots of superheroes wear capes, but only one wears a coat. A data coat. By day, she's Susan Walsh, but when dirty data rears its ugly head, she becomes the classification guru. What are the classification guru's superpowers? Consistency, organization, accuracy, and trust. With help from her good friend and trusty sidekick, the Data Whisperer.
Hi, Scott.
The classification guru wages war against dirty data, fighting her sworn enemies, misclassification, duplicate, and the typonator. It's the classification guru's job to clean up the mean streets of Excel City.
That was bang out of order.
So, when you're in Excel hell, don't let dirty data get you down. Call the classification guru.
And so that's a little bit of a teaser as to what's coming up this evening for you. It's going to be fun, let's say that. So first of all, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about myself, where I came from, my background. Then I'm going to talk about, well, what is dirty data? Because that's the problem, the thing that causes the most problems. But we all work with different kinds of data. So let's actually talk about what those different types could be. And then what are the consequences when we have that dirty data? What happens in business and in technology and reporting? And how can we try and ensure or at least minimize some of these mistakes and things when they happen? And of course, I'm not just going to talk about it. I'm going to show you how to do it as well. I'm going to give you practical tips that you can take away and use in Excel that you can share with anyone in your office. They don't need to be data professionals, and it will help you manage and maintain your data. And then I'll touch briefly on other tools because it's a question I often get asked. People think I'm an expert in Excel, but I don't actually use it. So we'll talk about some of the other tools that you can do the methodology in. And then I'm going to share with you the dirty data maturity model, something that I created. And again, it's a way to get the rest of a company or an organization involved in data quality. You can tell them technically what's wrong with something, but by showing them a visual, it might be much easier to get the message across. So I'm going to share that with you. And then we'll summarize at the end. And if you're really lucky, there might be another video. So first of all, a little bit about myself. How did I end up becoming the classification guru? Well, the first thing is I fell into data by accident. It was not my first calling. I guess it's the first true calling I've had. But before that, I worked in sales jobs, account management. I even opened a clothes shop. I live in Guildford. Might not sound like it, but that's where I've been for the last 20 years. That failed epically, so badly that I had to go bankrupt, but I couldn't afford to go bankrupt because it cost £600. So I had to save up to go bankrupt, and therefore I needed a job quickly. And online, I found an ad for doing some spend data classification. I thought, yeah, I can do that short term. I'm sure that's be fine. But that really is where I found my love and my passion for data. And I found I was really good at it. To me, it doesn't even feel like work. It's brilliant. And I spent 5 years at that spend analytics company, and I created my own methodology and ways of working while I was there. But then I realized it was time to set up the classification guru. And that's where the name came from, because I knew that I was very good in a very specific area. I'm not a data analyst, a scientist, an engineer. I don't have any qualifications. I don't code. I do use data modeling software to help me do all of that, but it's in a very niche area. And so really my only options were to start a whole new career or set up a business based on this. And, thankfully, there was a need for it. I have worked across all industries, countries, languages. I clean and normalize data, build customized taxonomies, classify data, cleanse databases. All the jobs that everybody else hates, my team and I are really happy to do. And I'm coming up for 5 years in business now, which is amazing. You know, in the beginning, there was a need for my services, but nobody was looking for me because no one else was offering this as a standalone service. And I guess that's why I've had to do some crazy things like lip syncs on LinkedIn to get noticed. But more than that, I've also written a book. So I've shared my knowledge too. And of course, it's called Between the Spreadsheets, Classifying and Fixing Dirty Data. And again, it's about making it interesting, making it fun, making it relatable, so that it's not just for the data people, but it's for anybody who's working with data who really needs to understand the importance of quality. And as Oscar said, I am now a Data IQ 100, which is absolutely amazing. I'm beyond excited about that. It's, for me, it's real validation. I've come in from nowhere, kind of like just pushed myself through the crowds into the data world and said, I'm here. And to be recognized by my peers is really special for me. But that's enough about me. Let's talk about the good stuff. What is dirty data? So first of all, like I said, it can be different things to different people. So it can be things like misspelt words. I mean, how many times have you seen typos in data sets, in descriptions, in names and addresses? It's rife, it's everywhere. And then we could also even have incorrect descriptions. So someone thinks they've copied and pasted something and pasted it into a cell. And guess what? They actually hadn't. They'd pasted the thing from before. And so you end up with a wrong description. That can happen all the time. Things like missing codes. If you're working with products, it can be really difficult if you don't have the codes. You could be ordering the wrong things, or you might think you don't have stock of something and you actually do. So it can have a lot of consequences. And then my favorite is in the wrong columns. There's so much data that sits in the wrong columns, particularly when it comes to addresses. So I see cities and towns and postcodes all the time. I see postcodes in city columns. I see cities in the county column. I see the whole address in one cell. Sometimes it's split out amongst maybe 4 or 5 columns. And that's just in one data set. It's so crazy. And it makes it really hard to do your job properly. And then increasingly, we are working within global companies and organizations or with global colleagues. And we're all using different units of measure. Is it meters, centimeters, inches, kilometers, miles, all those things? We're all working in different units of measure. And if we don't know, we could be comparing apples for bananas and not even realize. And this has very much happened to me with currency issues as well. We had done a currency conversion the wrong way for some Swedish krona. And so there were a lot of taxes at $500 that were looking very expensive. And of course, were not right, but the value itself and the context flagged that there was something wrong. And then my favorite is formatting issues. Now, I have run polls like this on LinkedIn. And if anyone on Zoom in the chat wants to write and type in how they format their addresses, what you'll find is that everybody does it slightly differently. And if you have a global audience, you might find that some people put the year first or the month first, not the day. You might find that people are spelling the month out, or maybe they're using separators such as dashes, slashes, dots, or no separators. There are so many different ways that people can format dates. And if we don't know that they're all from different regions, then again, you get things like documents will not match up on a date because they're in different formats, and it can cause all kinds of problems. And of course, when you've got all of those things, we have our good old friends, the duplicates. So you end up with duplicates or near duplicates, as I like to call them, where it's similar, but not quite the same. You know, things like avenue is abbreviated to av. And so you end up with 2 lines that are almost the same, but not quite. And in my world of spend data classification, I get to see some crazy classification that you might look at and think, how did they get that wrong? And the first example that I'm going to give you is LinkedIn, because we probably met most of each other on LinkedIn in some way, shape, or form. We know it's a networking platform, it's a recruitment platform, it's a training platform. What it is not is a restaurant. And that is what someone who was trialing out for me classified LinkedIn as. And the reason being, they had looked at the description only and not the supplier name. And in the work that I do, that's where context is really important. So never just look at one cell or one row, look at all the columns, all the rows and cells, and it will give you more context. And another example would be SurveyMonkey. So sometimes the name tells you what it does. We all know SurveyMonkey, we do market research. It's not consulting. Again, Speed Courier, it's not equipment maintenance, it says courier in the name. Use context. Some towing and recovery as well. And then my favorite one, which I still can't believe I found, was Tinder Corporation. So I was doing some work for a charity here in the UK, and I saw Tinder Corporation come up, and it did say additional data cabling. And I was thinking, there's no way they'd be using Tinder, not even for advertising. They wouldn't be allowed. And as I did more digging, it turns out that there's a Tinder Corporation Limited here in the UK that is an IT services company. So it's really also important when you're working with data, and sometimes, we're all guilty of this. We see the same stuff over and over again. We start to assume. Sometimes those assumptions can be very wrong. So again, use context. And another example I give for that is, say you had 5 rows of hammers, and 4 rows said £5 and 1 row said 500. If you were looking at that row on its own, you would not necessarily know that that £500 was not right. But if you see the hammers all together in context and all the rest are £5, then that you would know that there was most likely some kind of added zero that's been put into or a couple of zeros that have been put into the value by mistake. So really important to use context for all kinds of different things, even things like product codes. Quite often you'll have a series of products grouped together and they'll all start with the same number. So if you have something in there that's not in the same group, then it can give you a hint that something might not be right. And then also I normalize suppliers. So I take things like IBM, I.B.M, IBM Inc. and normalize them all to IBM. But again, if you assume you know something, you're going to get caught out. And this happened to me. Granger is a company here in the UK, and there's one in the US, but they're not the same. One is a house builder and one is industrial supplies. And so you have to be really careful. And again, if I had looked at all the data, all the descriptions, that would have stood out to me. And, it's easy for me to sit here and show you these examples, but when we're looking through rows and rows and rows, thousands of rows on a spreadsheet, it's not that easy to just pick stuff out. So I will share with you some tips later on how you can spot check your data. And how can we prevent this? Well, the first thing is, don't assume. So we've talked about that already. Always double check, use context, sense check. Maybe someone knows the data better than you, just ask them. Look at your name, your vendor name and description when classifying, or if it's a product and a price, whatever it is, use all the information you've got. And then think about, would the company that I'm working for use this product or service? Would they be buying this or selling this to someone? Because sometimes you can have a company like Granger where it's one thing in one country and something else in another country. So it can help keep you on the right track. And values are great at helping you guide, not just classification, but anything you're looking at, whether it's quantities or financial values or weights, all those kinds of things can help guide you. And you know what? When you're not sure, go and check on Google. Google is a skill. I have it. I'm the queen of Google. There's not much I can't find. What I can tell you is that there are hundreds of companies out there who don't tell you what they do on their website. They will tell you things like, we are leaders in our field. We've been developing a methodology that's made our clients successful for decades. No idea what they do. Go to services, it doesn't tell you either. So if you have a website, please make sure on the first page, it actually tells people what you do. And then actually check that the website you found matches the data you have. If we're working globally, in the UK, we're going to land on google.co.uk. It's going to bring up anything that's in the UK first. If you know that that company is from another country, you might want to do the company name and the country they're from to make sure that it's the right website you're looking at. You know, does that description in your data match with what the website is telling you? And if not, do another check to make sure. And that can be for companies, products, services, anything. And actually, that's nice. You know, we all know it happens and it's happening a lot, but why should we bother? Well, first of all, you and your colleagues and everybody in the world is going to save time fixing dirty data. How many times do you have to fix the same problem over and over again, month on month, quarter on quarter, year on year? So much time is wasted and lost, and the stress, you know, think you could be free of that if your data was clean. And it can be costly to rectify. So you might have to get someone in to fix it. It might not be able to be done in-house. It's going to affect decision-making processes, including things like budgets and bonuses and targets and how the company moves forward. It's going to impact all different departments. So imagine that somebody in forecasting puts an extra zero in the planning of making a product, and then suddenly it gets delivered and everyone realizes there's too much product. Then suddenly marketing and sales need to get involved to create a promotion to sell more of that product, and it goes on and on and on. And it's wasted money too. You might as well, you know, throw it out the window. You might be more successful. When you're looking at personal data, then it comes to things like GDPR too, because it's not just about securing that data. It's about having the right information and the accurate information too. So if you only need a first name, last name, and an email address, they have to be right, you know, but also you shouldn't be having their date of birth or their credit card details if all you need is a first name, last name, and email address. And that can cause some serious reputational damage. And that's a lot harder to recover from than just a fee from the ICO because you've not been looking after your data. So it's something to consider and be aware of. And it makes your life more difficult. I mean, who wants that? It's not good. But, you know, these are all quite negative things. Let's think about this a bit more positively. If you have the incentive to keep your data cleaner, it can increase profitability. And you might think, well, why should I care about that? Well, if you're on a team and you're working on a project and suddenly the clean data means that it takes half the time to do that project as it did before, your company is making more profit. Now, I would hope that you would be on some kind of performance related bonus, in which case, if you've helped increase profitability, your budget, your bonus might be increased as well. So it's definitely worthwhile for you as well. I mean, but for me personally, just having an easier life would be incentive enough. So that's why we should bother. But what about the consequences of it? And we've touched on it kind of a little bit, and I'm sure you've experienced this yourself. But in procurement world, it's cost savings. You could be buying the same product from 5 different suppliers at 5 different prices. You could go to one and negotiate a better price. You could improve the existing negotiations with your suppliers. I hear a lot, you know, manufacturers or retailers sit down with their suppliers and they rely on their suppliers for the data. And there's no guarantees that their data is correct. I mean, we all know most people's data is wrong, so they're having to rely on that information. It could be way off. Things like supplier rationalization, and that's what happens when we do supplier normalization. So making all those IBMs into one column called IBM. I had a client who had 41,000 suppliers, and after normalization, we got that down to about 34,000. So, it was a significant difference. We talked about forecasting as well, how that can cause problems, and then it has an impact on other areas of the business. Again, budgets too. Imagine if you could be getting more budget, but because of your dirty data, you don't have it. And then when it comes to things like addresses and personal information, you might not be targeting the right customers. So you could be mailing people who don't live at that address anymore. And that's wasted money on print, on postage, going to people that don't even live there anymore. And the chances are whoever is at that address isn't going to open it and look at it. And even things like shipping the correct products, if you get the codes wrong or the dimensions wrong. I've heard stories about somebody putting dimensions of a TV in as 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter instead of 1 meter by 1 meter. And so suddenly all those TVs, that 1 centimeter that they thought they could get on a truck, could not fit on a truck. Because, software also plans out truckloads, etc. now. So you have to be really careful. And I'm sure that caused a lot of problems in terms of not delivering on time, possibly some late fees, all kinds of problems. But it's not just that, it's analytics too. So if we go back to supplier normalization, here's a list of suppliers that are unnormalized. Now, again, normally this would be in a huge, massive file. They wouldn't be this easy to spot, but you can see there's different versions of the same company. When these are normalized, look, we only have 4 suppliers, and we can see that actually the value that we're spending with them is significantly different to what we looked at before. So it can really help to bring something visually to life and make it more accurate, and something that we can show senior management and be confident that we're giving them the right numbers. And then, of course, there is good old technology implementation. So data cleaning is often neglected before ERP, CRM system implementations. I also work with P2P in finance. It's all the same. The errors are only discovered post-implementation, and staff lose faith in the data. They're disengaged. They claim it doesn't work. They don't trust it because it's wrong. And it can be hard to come back from that, and it can cost a lot of money to fix. You have to hope that the staff will then adopt that technology. And sometimes, that project is abandoned, and that can be millions lost, all because they didn't want to invest a little bit of money up front to clean the data. And the same with AI, machine learning, and automation. You have to get it cleaned and prepared beforehand. AI is learning from training data sets, lots of them. If there's dirty data in there, any kind, it's going to learn that and then spread that dirty data throughout the new sets. It's going to contaminate everything. And again, if you're using machine learning, it's based on instructive information, rules, and coding. If someone's looking at a data set and building rules from that, if that's wrong, then those rules are going to be wrong, and it's going to make the data even more incorrect and cause more problems for everyone. It really is true what they say, the old adage of rubbish in and then rubbish out. So how can we start to try and ensure or minimize those errors? What can we do to help the cause? Well, first of all, I think we have to realize, and I'm preaching to the converted here. You guys all know there is no quick fix. There's no magic button or software in the world that is just going to magically fix people's data. You do need to have somebody, preferably who is experienced in that area, to look at the data and just spot check it to make sure it looks all right. And we have to get the whole organization involved. Not everyone is a data person, but we all work with data. Everybody needs to understand the importance of getting that data right and the consequences throughout the business, down the chain, if it's wrong, and how that could affect their colleagues in another department who might be, spending 2 hours fixing a problem that they've caused. And it's really important to agree those common standards, terms, processes, units of measure, currency, before you start something. Get everyone aligned and make sure that we're all talking the same language. And my top secret sauce tip is maintain and refresh your data regularly. Depending on how much you have, that can be monthly or quarterly, but keep updating your data because we're creating more and more data as every day goes on. But it's not good enough to just check the new data that comes in. You have to spot check the data that you've already cleaned, because guess what? People can delete things, they can accidentally cut and paste over other things, or they might just have a different opinion about something and decide that they want to change what it is. So you have to go back and spot check to make sure that it's easy. And, this is for everybody. This is not just for data professionals. And the way that I try to get everybody to remember it is by saying, make sure your data has its coat on. And what that means is, first of all, you need to have consistent data. So those standards, processes, terminologies, units of measure, date formats, get those all written down, get those agreed, get everybody working in the same way. And then have your data organized. So think of it like a wardrobe. You might throw a top in there or a shirt, and you go back the next week and you've got to rustle around to find it, and it might be a bit creased, and then you have to iron it before you can wear it, and then you go out. If you had ironed it, put it in your wardrobe next to all the other shirts, maybe even color coordinated if you're like me, then you could have just gone in and picked it out. And data is exactly the same as that. Have that ready. So when someone asks you something, you have the information, categorize it by country, by region, by department, by business unit, by, categories like of bought and sold, etc. Have that ready so that you can look great in front of your boss when they need something. And then, of course, it has to be accurate. And there's different levels of accuracy depending on what you're working with. So, for example, finance, you have to have those numbers 100%. There is no room for tolerance. However, if you're entering information into a database, accurate might be, or fit for purpose might be, filling in these 5 key cells that we need information on. And once you have your consistent, your organized, and your accurate data, you then have trustworthy data. And that means that whatever you're doing, you can make the best decisions knowing that you have the right data to back it up. And of course, there are actually different types of quotes out there as well. So which quote do you go for? Well, the first one, it's cheap, fast fashion, it gets the job done, but it might not last you more than a season before it's fallen apart and you need to go and buy another one. Then you've got your more dependable, hard weather wearing coat that sees you through all the seasons, it protects you and lasts. It might not look the best, but it gets you through. And then you've got your high-end, fancy, all singing, all dancing coat that looks fantastic, costs a fortune, but actually isn't going to protect you in the rain or keep you dry because it's all for show. So when you're thinking about your coat services, always think dependable, reliable, more affordable than you can think, always in style, and make sure that they are consistent, organized, accurate, and trustworthy. And that's how I live my values with when I'm working, and the team does as well. So that is your data quote. Hopefully you'll remember that. If not, there might be a bit of a reminder later. So next, let's go on to some tips on how to maintain and spot check that data. Let's give you some real life practical information. Now, obviously you're on a screen there in Brighton and Zoom, I'm more than happy to share like a handout of this at the end if that helps. You can contact me. You'll have my details at the end. I'm more than happy to share these. So first of all, it's in Excel. So I'm going to be honest, Excel is not always the best. It's not the greatest option, but it's something that we all work in. So it's something that we can all use and share our knowledge on. So the first thing I've done is I've taken my normalized suppliers and my level 1, 2, 3, 4 categorization. And I've popped it into a pivot table. And then obviously it's not in a great format, so I've changed it to a tabular view. I've removed the subtotals because I don't want to see those. And then I start to scroll for anything that doesn't look right. So I'm looking for supplier names and then the categorizations. And it might stand out, you know, that there's maybe like some hotels or taxis that are classified as consulting, something like that. Or we could flip it the other way around and do it by category and look for things, suppliers that stick out. So for example, in facilities, building maintenance, for example, you wouldn't expect to see a lawyer. So there's different ways that you can do it. And if you have like people's names, you can do it with this as well. So play around with it. Oh, good question, Tristan. So he's asking if there's a limit to the amount of rows that I'm cleaning. Well, I haven't had a limit. The most I've done so far is about 4 million. And a little bit about the services that my team and I do. We are, I mean, I say we're 100% manual. We're not really. We do semi-automate some of the process, but I firmly believe that when you look at a data set for the first time, you have to have eyeballs on it. And we've been doing this between us for over 40 years. So we will go through and we will classify it, and then we'll build master files that we can use to then update and refresh data moving forward. But you know, the tool that I use can handle millions and millions and millions of rows of data. So it doesn't scare me. In fact, on my own, before I had a team, I had a 2.3 million row database. They had multiple different sources, so MailChimp and their database and their retail stores. And I went through and deduplicated that all by myself in about 4 days, and got it down to about 1.3 million rows of unique customers. So you know, just because it's manual doesn't mean it's that slow. I think that's pretty good. And also, you know, I was, you know, confident that that was really accurate data. So next, if we just move on, when I'm looking at it in Excel, it's really hard to flip between tabs. I get really frustrated because I want to be as efficient as possible. So I go to new window, select all, and I would arrange vertically. And I'm just looking, Stephanie and Jeff, so I don't use SQL or Python. I do, and I'll cover off later, use another tool. But the visual checks that we're doing in Excel, you could find a way to repeat that and do that in whichever tool you're using. And you could do it with BI, you could do it with Tableau Click. I've just kind of reverse engineered it into the lowest common denominator of what everyone uses. So I've got my tabs. I'm going to arrange them side by side, and we've got our pivot table, and then we've got our raw data. And what I can start to do is scroll down the pivot, look at what's not right, change it in the raw data, and then use refresh all to update the pivot table so that I don't keep going over the same wrong data again and again. And then you could also add more detail into the pivot too. So maybe supplier name isn't enough. Maybe you want to look at the description as well, and then look at the classification. So you can do that too. And then that might help get that extra level of detail when it comes to checking classification. And as I talked about earlier, you could also flip reverse that by having your categories first. So in this instance, we've got DHL sitting under facilities. You might not expect that to be there. So it sticks out. And again, if you're maintaining your data regularly and looking at it regularly, you will start to know when things don't look quite right. You'll be able to check if they are, things will jump out at you if you're used to seeing the data in a certain format or pattern or style. And then, as I was talking about, there are other tools. So this is really just a quick whistle stop overview. There's a whole book in Excel that you can, again, customize to whichever tool you're using. There's all these different tools that you could start to look at the data and interrogate it. The one that I use is Omniscope. It's a data modeling and visualization tool in one. So I guess I do visual coding. I'm not actually writing any code or scripts, but it's similar to Alteryx in that way. I'm using blocks to model everything. Then we're checking the data visually in the visualization part of the software, and we can have it kind of like live and right back. So I've been using it for years. It's my best kept secret. I love it. As I say, you can take what's been done and modify it to however you're working. I'm just kind of giving you the basic tools so that you can take it and run with it yourselves. Okay, so good question, Stephanie. So in the work that I do stakeholders most often give me a data dictionary? How do I double check with the people who collected and compiled the data? No data dictionaries. I'm sure I work a lot with procurement teams, so I'm not even sure they know what a data dictionary is. Quite often they don't know their own data. I know more about it than they do. So, and something that I kind of do to show the value in what I'm doing, because they don't often see it, is I'll show them a before spreadsheet and after. And that's really the only way they can see the improvement, because they're not familiar with the data, or before they've worked with me, they never knew how much they spent on car hire, solicitors, software. Suddenly they have a whole world opened up to them that they never knew about before. So a lot of the clients I work with are very immature in terms of what they have with their data, or I find a lot that procurement departments don't necessarily speak to the data team or the finance team, so that can cause problems as well. Now, I can't let you go without sharing with you the dirty data maturity model. As I say, this is something that I came up with, and I just wanted to have something visual that people could show within the business to the receptionist, up to the CEO, and people would just look at it and understand if they said, our data's here and we need it to be here. So the first step of the dirty data maturity model is dirty data. And I like to think of this as the equivalent of turning your underwear inside out to wear for another day. You know you can get away with it, but you're going to get caught out eventually. And that is what dirty data is like. You are walking a fine line and you're going to get caught at some point, and it's going to blow up in your face. At this stage, you'll be lucky if you've got Excel. It will be siloed. There will be no main system, no main drives. There certainly won't be data dictionaries. This is the basic of basic in terms of data. Then we move to D-class data. And this is, our data's fine. We've got some finance GL codes, still using Excel, maybe a little bit of tidying or cleansing, but everything's in silos. Nobody's talking to each other. There's no standards or terms. Then we've got our distributed data. And, at this point, we're starting to maybe get a little bit more organized, maybe have some rules and processes, maybe start to have some information on a shared drive. maybe starting to think about or talking about a single source of truth, and maybe some data dictionary or data rules, maybe even somebody assigned to that. Then we start to move into disordered data. So we are starting to get it in order now. We have dictionaries, we have data governance, we have people in place, we are using automation and tools to get our data right. It may be mostly in one place, with a little bit of silo data going on. But the pinnacle, the ultimate, of course, is dirt-free data. And this is the hardest stage, because once you have as clean data as you're going to get, it's really hard to keep it at that level. You have to work twice as hard as all the other levels to keep it there. You have to stay on top of it. You have to have all your rules, processes, procedures. You have to review them regularly. You have to make sure everyone knows what they're doing, communicating. And then, you know, that's the pinnacle. And sad to say, I don't think most companies ever make it to that stage. And we're coming to the end of our journey now. So to summarize, accurate data is critical. You know, there are no shortcuts when it comes to it. You have to know and maintain your data, agree those common standards, get everybody involved, let them feel, try and get them to feel some kind of responsibility for what the data they're working with. And, you know, tell them, make sure that everybody has got their data coat on. And if you need a little bit of a reminder, here's something for you.
Are you leaving your data out in the cold? You wouldn't go out into sub-zero temperatures without the correct protection, so why do so many companies forget to protect their data? Unprotected data can lead to bad business decisions that cost money and put jobs at risk. That's why your data needs its coat on. This means making sure your data is consistent, organized, accurate, and trustworthy. Consistent means using the same standards, terms, and classifications company-wide. Organized data makes it easier to find. Think of it like a messy closet. It can be difficult to find what you're after, even when you know it's in there. When organized correctly, it becomes easier to find what we want. Data should be accurate, which can mean different things to different people, but at its most basic level, accurate data is correct. And finally, data should be trustworthy. This is critical. If your team can't trust the data, they might not use it. And business decisions around jobs, staffing, and budgets are all based on data, so it's got to be right. Like any coat, there are differences in the quality of data services out there. If you buy a cheap coat, it might not be waterproof or protect you enough, and it won't last more than one season. If you don't invest in good quality data services, you will end up paying twice as much, if not more in the long run, to fix the earlier mistakes. If you'd like to speak to an expert about data in your own business, visit theclassificationguru.com to find out more.
And that is me. And here are my details. If you scan that QR code, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I know some of my LinkedIn connections are here tonight. So hello, hi Tristan. Next time I will definitely come down and meet you guys. I will make it my mission to get to Brighton at some point. Thank you so much for having me, and hopefully, happy to answer any questions you might have.